Now, Afghanistan may be a familiar sight on our television screens, but when it comes to our knowledge of the history and culture of this country, most of us are left wanting.
In this month's Ireland AM Book Club choice, 1,000 Splendid Sons by Khaled Hosseini, the stories of two women, Mariam and Lila, are played out against the backdrop of 4 decades of tumultuous Afghan history. Here to discuss this with us is journalist Don Duncan, who's a reporter from Afghanistan himself on a regular basis. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Good morning.
Somebody once said to me, it's not really a country, it's more a collection of different tribes. Yeah. And for that reason alone, it's going to be very hard for any stability to be put into the region.
Yeah, and that's a worry on people's minds right now. I mean, living in Afghanistan, they're glad of the stability that's come since 2001, but they're also very aware of how precarious that is and how easy it can fall apart and how it has fallen apart in the past. So I think in the West, and kind of when you're in America, you hear a lot about how the invasion in 2001 and the intervention worked very well. In Afghanistan, for them, it could look like a band-aid solution, or it's not necessarily for the long term. It's not something that they necessarily think will be here for decades to come, and that's something that worries them a lot sometimes.
And there are reports now that the Taliban influence is back, and hugely back.
Exactly. I was there 8 months ago in Kabul and in the north of Afghanistan, and then it was pretty safe to kind of walk around a lot of Kabul, and there had been some attacks in the past, but it's kind of a pendulum. Every so often there's an upsurge, and right now, since I left, it's upsurged. Last week there were attacks on key ministries in the city, so it's a place where the sands of security kind of shift very easily. And I remember day to day, even I was only there for 2 weeks, I would have to consult every morning with my translator or my guide. Is it safe to go down this road? Is it safe to go to the city? And one day it would be, and the next day it wouldn't. And it kind of baffled me, like, how can it change so fast? But it's all about units that are active in certain areas.
Just before we get into this, how do you place your trust in these people? Who recommends them? How do you know that they're 100%?
I mean, I don't think it's ever 100%, but you kind of there's a peer review among journalists, and you just call up people that you know that have been there, and they're like, well, there's this company, there are these people, and it's just through testimony and experiences that other Western journalists have had. But it is a little scary.
Did you have much contact with women on the ground there? Because the book 1,000 Splendid Sons is really about women's lives out there.
I did. Well, we went over to make a short documentary about disability in Afghanistan. So we're kind of looking at another minority, and kind of another, not a minority, but a disadvantaged group in Afghanistan. But by extension, I mean, you can't avoid women, of course. It's like more than half the population. They are hard to find sometimes, because a lot of them, depending on which kind of background they're from, would be sequestered inside houses, which is where the title, the Splendid Sons that are hidden behind the walls. But because I was traveling with an Afghan who was returning to Afghanistan, I got to get inside the family life of an Afghan family, and it was very interesting because your average house is kind of split into 2 zones. There's the male zone, which is kind of the public, welcoming hospitality area, and then there's the women's zone, which is more where things are prepared. And I remember thinking, God, it's just kind of struck me, that's strange, and it must be difficult. But then I managed with time to get into the kitchen and hang out with the women, and it was amazing. I mean, there's such a kind of a tight network and a real camaraderie among the women, and that's something that isn't really reflected in the book. It's about kind of solitary women that a lot of them are having a really hard time. But within that kind of within that difficulty that they have a great support network as well. That's really a lot stronger than a lot of women would have in the West.
And how are they? I mean, we have this idea that we need to impose Western values and Western ideals on people in sort of the society there. And is there an interest in that? Is there a sort of, I mean, everybody wants an education, you assume, but is that the hot talk around the table?
I think that's what's interesting is, like, at the end of the book, it finished in 2003. There's this kind of euphoria, like, we're free, the Americans are great, the NATO are great, isn't it wonderful? And by the time I got there 8 months ago, that's beginning to wear thin, and people are realizing that democracy, as we in the West imagine it, doesn't necessarily fit completely on Afghanistan. Like you said, it's more like a loose alliance of tribes, and now they're supposed to kind of make that work with one central government, with Hamid Karzai at the top, and that doesn't necessarily play with conventional political logic in Afghanistan.
But do you think, as Aidan was saying, do you think that the women of Afghanistan, and it's generalising, sweeping statement, not all of them, but is there a desire, do they look at Western women and think, oh, I would love to have that freedom? Do they want that freedom?
That's happening, but I think it's hard to talk about women in Afghanistan in one kind of category, and that's another thing that the book does very well, is that it kind of layers different experiences, and it shows that not all women in Afghanistan are that Burkett figure that we're used to seeing in the press, and I think that's why these books are so important. They might not necessarily be Booker Prize-winning books, but they serve as an antidote to kind of news coverage that we're getting from Afghanistan, and show many kinds of women. So there are women that are getting influenced. There's a huge upsurge in Western media now flowing into the country, and women are seeing Western women, women from other parts of the world, and the kind of freedoms they have, and are wanting that. You know, and also education is being rolled out.
Give us a snapshot of maybe a day there in Kabul. You know, what do you see in the streets? Are the streets active? Are people going about their normal?
Yeah,
I presume they are.
And Kabul is it's the most cosmopolitan place in Afghanistan. So you have lots of different kinds. I noticed in all the places I was in Afghanistan, it's the place where you have most mixture. You have burqas, then you have hijabs, then you have hair. You know, there's lots of different kinds of, there's a whole spectrum of freedom there. But it is jittery, like it's quite close to Helmand and Kandahar, and it is a capital, so it is a political target, so there's a lot of security. I remember, like, simple thing of going for a beer in one of the pubs that's frequented by Western people living there the pub is covered in sandbags, first of all. You wouldn't recognize it, like you drive past it and you have to reverse. And then there are about 3 or 4 metal doors. You get checked your ID, frisked, and you get through all these doors, and finally the doors open, and like it's a pub, and you can get a beer. Finally, like it's strange.
And assuming that's done to protect because no alcohol.
Western buildings and places are targets, you know. So, but up in Mazar-e Sharif, it's the 4th biggest city in the north. That's a lot safer. There's almost no presence. You'd forget you're in a country that's still at war. And that's where I saw a lot of really encouraging signs for women. I went to a women's school. It's very interesting. It used to be a Taliban base. When you have these new political shifts happening, key infrastructure gets kind of turned on its head.
So Taliban base is now a women's school?
A women's school, and it's this powerhouse of female education, in the north.
Which the Taliban were, of course, intently against.
And they may crush again if they get back in,
exactly,
you know?
They will, of course. And if you look at it from the point of view that if you're 45 or under, you've been in a country that's always been in some sort of conflict or other.
It's sad, and you can see it actually written on people's faces. People look a lot older. You might have seen that when you were there. But I met people that looked like 60, and they tell you they're 28, and you just can't believe them. But it's just been a harrowing through decades.
Fascinating stuff.
Don,
the book mirrors reality. The book mirrors reality in Kabul, so it's a great read.
And you'd recommend people to read it, Don?
I would.
Fantastic. Thank you for joining us this morning.